One of the objectives of these few lectures is to introduce ecology for people who are not non-ecology background or non-biology background. So, I would look at why do we need to study ecology and environment. So, I am showing some pictures which are just happening in our backyard most of the time, and we may not be observing it because we may not see it happening. But at the same time, this is all over the place and we need to pay attention to this. So, I am initially showing some of the impacts of our activities on the environment, our immediate environment, and we will go from there to the need for studying ecology as a background. So, for example, this picture shows for example, we throw plastics and other non-biodegradable waste into the environment. This is a backyard picture of a famous monument or some historical structure. So, every place that we visit, we can see that there is a due to human mismanagement of waste is thrown around everywhere. Especially plastics and non-biodegradable waste. So, this example is sometimes wildlife gets affected. The picture showing a deer dead which has consumed plastic because we package food and other things in plastic and we throw it outside, and we do not know who will be consuming that waste which we have thrown out. For us it is waste, for the other animal it becomes sometimes an unknown accidental consumption of that food item, and it becomes it causes death or lethality in the animal. The next slide shows how that is about how we throw around solid level of waste, the waste that is in the solid state. The next picture shows most of our urban areas. If you look at, if there is any water body, let us say if you take Chennai city, there are 2 rivers flowing through the city. So, if you look at any of these water bodies, and if you go closer to any human settlements there, you will see that there is lot of household and other waste. That is basically when we take water in, which is potable in nature, and when we flush, the water comes out, we do not know where it is going, and the water is ending up in most of the time in freshwater bodies like either lakes or rivers or oceans. Not freshwater, essentially ocean also. We do not see again this pollution that is happening because it is happening at the backyard of our households. So, this is an example of pollution which is in the liquid state. And so, soil pollution, for example, is another cause of worry, which again we do not see, it is invisible, but it because soil is also a very live entity with a lot of living organisms there, but it threatens a whole lot of life on earth. For example, if you put some soap solution or a detergent solution into soil, you can see that how earthworms die and come up immediately. So, similarly there are so many chemicals and other invisible agents that we are throwing out into the environment, which is causing damage to living systems around us. Then look around for the gaseous form of pollution, that is all around us in the form of either transportation, industrial, or transportation of various means, which are all causing gaseous form of pollution. So, we have all kinds of pollutions that is around us. So, why do we need to worry about this? So, that life, especially all forms of life, and because we are talking about why we need to as human beings, why we need to study ecology, we cannot disengage ourselves and say that ecology is something else which I do not need to know. I need to know because human life is intricately connected to other forms of life on earth and its environment. As I said we will be discussing this because of the system concept that comes in ecology and ecology. You need to know that our life is not something that we can separate out. It is like the human body, if I take, it has different systems which are working. For example, we have circulation, blood circulation, that is controlled by circulatory system, or digestive system which takes care of our food, how it is digested, and the nutrients are absorbed in our body. Or if I look at the nervous system, for example, it controls all our muscle activities, all other activities of our body. But at the same time, if we cannot take out each of this system and say that a live human being is can work independent of, let us say, nervous system, or let us say the other different systems that are muscular system, or any other system that is contributing to the whole well-being of that system. Similarly, the life on earth is actually intertwined with many other factors that is making life possible on earth. So, hence life and its interactions with the environment in any form are important for engineers, especially this course is delivered to engineers and scientists, and so it's very, or others who are not studying ecology per se. So it's very important in our day-to-day decision making, and that decision making can affect the environment and the ecology, and in turn the ecosystem services that is rendered to us by the ecosystems. So human activities should not engage in destruction of life forms should be one of the principles that need to be followed here. So now when I, as an example, I am taking a conventional engineering design process in which how do we look at a problem, for example. So an engineer is given a problem of designing, let us say, a pen or a building or a rocket or engine, or let us say a mobile phone, or you know, a television or a radio or whatever. So that product, when you are designing, you do certain steps which are iterative in nature, which is like drawing up on your 4 years of engineering education or whatever, and then draw upon that knowledge and experience to come up with a tentative design. At that stage we select materials or whatever that we want to use, and how is it going to perform, how is it function, how is its cost, etc. So many parameters we optimize at that level, and then if there is anything that is not refined at level, we will further refine that design and then get to the final design of the item that we are thinking. But then in the conventional engineering design process, for example, we consider 3 constraints. These are cost, safety and level of performance. So these are the questions normally asked to any engineer who is designing, let us say a product, let us say a pen or a mobile phone or whatever. What is the cost? Is it safe to use? What is its functionality? Level of performance, is it compliable with the 3G or 4G or whatever. The question that we always or normally forgets to ask is, are there enough resources on earth to design this product or process? Are we impinging upon earth's resources to live? What is meant by this earth's resources? So if an engineer is using a material, you may be thinking it is just the availability of that material. Let us say you are designing a car. One of the resource material that is required for the functioning of the car would be the energy requirement, which could be coming from, let us say, a non-renewable source like petroleum or diesel. So the question is like, it is a resource that is coming from earth, whether it will be sustained throughout or whether it can be sustained throughout or not. The next question that could ask, that when you are taking up this energy, does it affect other ecosystems and compromise the functionality of the other life forms that are sustaining there. Let us say we need energy again for lighting up a particular place, or lights and usage of electricity. So the question is, where does the energy come from? So it is again could be from various sources. It could be from hydroelectric power, it could be from nuclear power, it could be from solar power, it could be from various sources. Let us say there is a hydroelectric power that is coming. So does it compromise, let us say, on any resources that is required? So it is taken from water, and you turn turbines to generate electricity. But at the same time, you also will know that hydroelectric dam, if you have to construct, mostly it is constructed in catchment areas where rain falls, and that could submerge large areas of forest land, which could be compromising on earth's resources for rejuvenating the functionality. For example, the source of water that is produced from the forests are compromised by doing that, the operation of designing a dam in that particular locality. So there are invisible damages on the resources sometimes it is direct damages or direct taking up of resources, and the non-replenishability of the resource could be a problem. Second could be damaging the functionality of the resources. Third could be polluting the resources. So this could be happening during the lifetime of that product. It could be from if I look at the life cycle of a particular product, it could be from the raw material availability to the end of the product when it is thrown out into the environment, or when you want to dispose it, how is it disposed. Through this life cycle of a particular product, you will be compromising on, or we will be compromising on, many of earth's resources that will be used during its lifetime. So the human impact, if we want to then on environment, There are many examples we can, indirect or direct impacts. For example, if we take buildings, they look like dead systems, where there is no particular thing that we can assign as on environment. But at the same time, buildings require, for example, sometimes heating, or sometimes if it is in hot countries you require cooling. So these buildings, for example, consume a whole lot of energy. An example is in the US, for example, many buildings consume more than 30% of their total energy is consumed by buildings itself, and 60% of electricity annually, which is oil and coal based. So which shows the indirect impact on the environment or the earth's resources in terms of buildings. Secondly, average, this is citing US citizens, but that is the case now today. You can average it to any developed countries, including India, China, any other country. The citizens who can really afford luxury life, or even life which is middle class, what we call us, could be using this kind of energies that I have written in this PowerPoint. So average US citizen uses about 1,86,000 calories of energy per day. So human need, for example, as if you take as an animal, let us say, every animal we can classify saying that it requires certain amount of energy, and human beings we can say that we require something like 2,000 to 3,000 calories. So instead of that we use something like 1,86,000 or something of the order of so if you look at the requirement, it is a huge multiplication that is required to arrive at this number that is given here, which is indirect use of various forms of energy that is required. So we will come to this when we are looking at ecological systems and energy flow in ecological systems. We will realize that the human beings, if you want to fix us into the food web, where do we stand? So if we were taking only 2,000, 3,000 calories, it means that we are just eating the food and then sustaining ourselves. But that is not the case. We require energy for not just food alone. We require for housing, we require for transportation, we require for material needs. We will see how this translates into our energy requirements. So then we are also consuming a whole lot of fresh water, which is potable in nature, especially for applications like flushing toilets. So the water becomes completely non-usable or non-potable at the instant that we use for purposes like washing, cleaning, or flushing toilets, etc. So the water becomes unusable, which is equivalent to the water pollution, or the pollution, the pollution, that effluent that comes out of households itself. Similarly, for every 100 gram of product, today we create about 3.2 kilograms of waste. So that is the story everywhere. Any product that we take, everything is packaged. That packaging means we are creating more and more waste elsewhere. On an average, similarly, food is also traveling a whole lot of distance today. So from where it is produced or grown or produced, which is also causing to where it is eaten. For example, if you look at the rice or the wheat or the fruits or whatever that we are eating today, where is it originating and where is it cultivated and how is it transported across to different continents, sometimes different large distances before it is reaching our table. So this also means a lot of energy consumption and also pollution during the transportation of these materials. So the level of environmental destruction rises with the volume of stuff consumed and with the distance it travelled. So how do we know what is its impact? All these things that we are consuming, the amount of materials that we consume and the distance that it travels, it has an impact. Is it possible to measure it? So this measurement, what is the impact of us on the environment, is given in terms of a quantity called ecological footprint. Many of us would have heard a term called carbon footprint, but it is very important for us to know not just carbon footprint. The ecological footprint is more important for us to define why, how life can be sustained on earth if we need to do that. So ecological footprint, for example, for it is given for any, North American, it is about 5 hectares of arable land or a cultivable land per person per year. So, but the world has only 1.2 hectares of usable land per person, which means if we can on an average, if every person gets only 1 hectare of land, if we are a very affluent society and having a lifestyle which is equivalent to the upward middle class lifestyle, we will be requiring something like 5 earth instead of 1 earth. That is the meaning of this. So, this ecological footprint is nothing but it is a measure of the land. So, we can translate all our requirements into some form of land usage. So, this is a land requirement for growing our food, processing our organic waste. We are not at all talking about even non-biodegradable waste and other things. We are talking about only processing our organic waste, even that requires some land area, sequester our carbon dioxide and provide our material needs. So, if we include all this, we will get something called ecological footprint. There are different kinds of ecological footprint calculators on the web. One can go and use those calculators and put in the numbers that you use. For example, if you are traveling by car or by scooter or by bus or by cycle or walk, you can see what is your footprint, ecological footprint, which is actually sum of various things that is put together as shown in this slide. The ecological footprint has carbon footprint, food footprint, housing footprint and goods and services footprint. The average per capita footprint is given in quantity known as global hectares by consumption category. So, each of this is given us for example, the total footprint which is given here is can be divided into 4 categories. One is carbon footprint, food footprint, housing footprint, goods and services footprint. So, this footprint, the quantity is given in global hectares, and this global hectare is a common unit that quantifies the biocapacity of the earth. So, we are going towards why ecology is important and where is all these our material requirements, where our food requirements, all our needs for energy, where are all these things getting translated into how we are affecting ecosystems, how we are affecting the environment, how we are affecting the ecosystem services that our biosphere is providing us. So, the global hectare is a common unit that quantifies the biocapacity of the earth. What is the biocapacity? It is the biological capacity of an ecosystem which is an estimate of its production of certain biological materials such as natural resources and its absorption and filtering of other materials such as carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So, it is essentially the biological capacity of an ecosystem. So, one global hectare measures the average productivity of all biologically productive areas, which means how, for example, if I look at carbon dioxide absorption on on earth, it is exclusively carried out by living organisms such as plants, or these systems which can absorb and convert them into useful matter. One global hectare measures the average productivity of all biologically productive areas measured in hectares on earth in a given year. So, examples of biologically productive areas include, it could be a farmland, or it could be forests, or it could be some fishing ground, but they do not include these are the calculation of biocapacity does not include non-biologically, though they are also biologically active in a very limited fashion, limited way. Deserts are not included, glaciers and the open ocean are not included in the calculation of this global hectare. So, the remaining available land that is producing, that is having plant mass and other life forms which can absorb the carbon dioxide and also can provide some natural resources, is only considered in the calculation of this global hectare. So, so this is also assuming that no other species is existing. This global hectare calculation assuming that there is no other species, we are the only consumers for all the resources that earth is producing, which is not a correct estimation. So, if we adjust for all the other species also, the availability of that global hectare, that per capita footprint that is available to us will shrink further. So, now we are exploiting the earth with the assumption that there is no other species requiring any land area, any natural resources. They do not need to process carbon dioxide. All these assumptions are taken into account to get this number here, which is not accurate. So, you can also do an assignment of calculating your own footprint and using 2 different calculators and see if you see that your footprint is above 1, the global footprint if equal to ecological footprint being equal to 1 means for you are able to meet your requirement using the current earth that we have, that is 1 earth is only required. But if it is above 1, let us say if it is 2, it means that 2 earths are required to meet our requirements. Or if somebody is getting, let us say 5 as ecological footprint, it means you require 5 earths to meet your requirements. So, the question is, if your footprint is above 1, what practical approaches would you adopt to reduce it? There are various means that when you are doing the calculator, using the calculator available on the web, you can see that there are various ways in which you can reduce a footprint. For example, your footprint using a means of transport. Currently, let us say you are using car to go to office, or a motorbike to come to the class. So, is it possible for you to switch to a public transport system like a bus, or you could walk to the office or to the school? Is it possible to reduce your footprint? Or for example, the food that you are consuming today, is it possible to change the kind of food that you are consuming to something which has lower footprint? Or the kind of lifestyle that we may have, we may using energy, more energy consuming devices like air conditioners or other devices, when it is not required also at certain times of the year. Is it possible to reduce the footprint by reducing the energy? So, these are the changes that is expected here. Similarly, what do you consider are the drawbacks of these calculators if they are used in the Indian context? Many of these ecological footprint calculators are developed elsewhere, but are there any drawbacks if you adapt it to an Indian context? So, now if we look at all the causes of environment problems, there are multiple causes to it. One is like population growth. So, there are multiple reasons being cited in literature. I am just citing few of them. So, one is population growth. So, as human population is growing, the demand for, as you can see with the ecological footprint that you are calculating, the demand for the resources of earth is increasing, and also the waste and the pollution that we are creating is increasing. Similarly, unsustainable resource use. What is meant by unsustainable resource use is again there is the rate at which resources can be produced. For example, if you take certain resources we call as non-renewable resources. An example is petroleum or diesel. So, if you take, they have forms available on earth, or let us say take coal, these are all deposits which are energy sources which are available on earth, but that has transformed into that energy or usable material form over millions of years of transformation that has happened to renewable source like plant materials which have died long time ago. But currently, if you want to convert any of the plants to, let us say gasoline or diesel, it is not possible unless you put in lot of energy to convert them back into energy of diesel or petrol. So, if we consume let us say the non-renewable energy sources like diesel or petrol at very high rates, and then we will not be able to replenish them at the rate at which we are consuming it, or let us say we are cutting a tree to make furniture. So, for the conversion of that to a product of our use, it took maybe only 1 week's time, but at the same time to grow that tree back to that level, it may take 30 or 40 years. So, it is an unsustainable resource use in some sense, because the rate at which you are consuming is not the rate at which you are replenishing it. Similarly, poverty also can be causing environmental problems. Excluding environmental costs from market prices, which is also an environmental problem, and trying to manage nature without knowing enough about it. This is one of the biggest mistakes that most of us are making, and because we are part of this whole complex system and we do not know what we are doing is how is it affecting the earth's functioning and the ecosystem's functioning. So, are there solutions to such problems? So, the current emphasis on environmental problems is, if there is a pollution, clean it up using environmental technologies. So, if you look to the future, what we call as sustainable solutions, if you want to look at, we have to think about producing the waste itself, which are known as clean technologies, or it could be waste disposal. So, current practice is to bury or burn it. So, is it possible to prevent the disposal or the pollution prevention itself? So, current again emphasis on environmental problems is protecting species. For example, we hear always protecting a particular species or the other. Let us say we talk about lions of Gir in India, they need to be protected. Or for example, we will hear about tigers. So, these are all species wise protection. Are there other species existing in this? Let us say if you take Gir sanctuary, are there any other species there? Or if you take a tiger sanctuary, we hear about a lot of tigers and their protection, but do we hear about other species that exist in those on these sanctuaries, which are their habitats. So, our focus should shift from just species to protecting the habitat, because that is very important. The species are vanishing because the habitat is not protected, not because species require a special protection against poaching or a special protection against only one aspect of it. It is multiple aspects of protecting the habitat is important for protecting the species. Environmental degradation. So, the current emphasis is to reduce the environmental degradation, but the future sustainable solution should be towards restoring the environment to its original clean state. Similarly, increasing resource use is one of the emphasis today as of our human needs. We require more and more resources that is available on earth. So reduce the less resource wastage. So, we can shift to so most of this resource that we are gathering today for various uses need not be utilized more effectively. So, is it possible to reduce the resource waste? An example is in engineering, you can think of reducing the material usage in design or reduce the usage of energy. So, if you come up with energy efficient devices or material efficient devices, let us say a mobile phone, does it have to be a very large device? Can I design with less material and less energy consumption? So, that is actually a pro method towards reducing the demand on resources. So, basically you can avoid the resource wastage in those circumstances. So, as engineers you can do many things, or scientists or others who are looking at lifestyles or usage or designing systems, you can think of alternatives which will reduce and then focus on sustainable solutions. Similarly, population growth we are currently focusing on. So, for example, many times we hear that certain countries the population is declining, certain countries population is growing exponentially. This is altogether human impact. If you take it is a global impact rather than if we subdivide into different categories or different countries or different nations, the human impact is global. So, whether it is climate change or whether it is causing compromising the quality of environment. So, it is important to stabilize human population. So, when we come to ecology, we try to understand every species has a certain number in the population that it can reach for a sustainable long term survival. So, is there an upper limit that we can set for human population? Is it required to go to that the level at which it can? So, or should it go on increasing? So, if any species when it is increasing in number, the population dynamics will shift towards more problems. Depleting and degrading natural capital is the current emphasis. So, it is not only that we are taking away the natural capital which is in terms of various resources that is available to us. So, we have to see the earth's ecosystems and the services that provide that we are getting as natural capital. So, the emphasis should be shifting to protecting natural capital. It should not be in designing or looking for example, exploiting. What is the maximum possible way of exploiting that is what is available in nature. So, the 4 scientific principles of sustainability which are interconnected are, so that is what we learn from nature. The earth has been living with this different life forms for about 3.56 billion years. It is not that we have come only like few seconds ago. If you put it on on a clock which is having 24 hours, human beings have appeared just before this 24-hour clock. If I take, it will be just the last few seconds of the clock. So, if we are in this 3.56 billion years of earth's existence, there were many life forms which have come and gone, and many times earth has undergone different periods, epochs of extinction, mass extinctions of species. All this has happened. So, we learn a few lessons from this. We should learn few lessons from this for to live harmoniously on earth, and which includes this sustainability principle. So, these sustainability principles involve these 4 circles shown here. So, that shows that these are interconnected. So, for example, all earth's living systems are dependent on solar energy. So, similarly, this leads to the biodiversity on earth, and this solar energy how it is used for biodiversity, and then that biodiversity is again linked to population. So, how each species and its population is controlled within this biosystems, and the diversity is dictated by the interactions between this energy that is flowing into the system and the kind of population that is interacting with each other. And similarly, the non-interactive part is, the non-living part of it is the nutrients which are cycling through this system, which is also very essential for the existence of life on earth. So, these 4 circles dictate, or interconnected circles dictate, how life is sustained on earth, and how we should look into the future to sustain life in a sustainable fashion we can live. So, the pioneering environment Aldo Leopold, he has talked about the ethics of how to live on earth, and how we can reduce our damage. So, all ethics so far evolved rest upon a single premise, that the individual is a member of a community of interdependent parts. So, it is a very important principle here that we have to remember, that each of us are a part of the community of interdependent part. We do not have an independent existence. So, whether it is non-living nutrients, or whether it is the community that we live in, or we are interacting with the other elements of earth. So, to keep every cog and wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering. So, we have to think, if we are thinking animals which are part of this system, we have to think about keeping every cog and wheel in its place. And that land is a community is the basic concept of ecology, but that land is to be loved and respected in an extension of others. The land ethic changes the role of Homo sapiens from conqueror of the land community to plain member and citizen of it. So, we should not be, as individual species which are existing here, human beings or Homo sapiens should not look at land as some place to conquer and own up and do whatever we feel like. Instead, we should be living as a member of this community which is contributing towards its well-being. So, we abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. We sell and buy land, and we do various things. Once we so called own the land, we do various things. So, this should not be done in a way that will affect the existence of life on the land. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. Anything is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability and beauty of the biotic community. That means the living system should be allowed to live and be preserved. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. That means when we try to destroy the integrity, stability and beauty of the living systems, we are doing the wrong, and that is what is causing problems to the environment and the ecology. So, now when it comes to ecology, we ask many questions here. So, ecology is so first question is, what is ecology? We have defined it, or you have studied it in school as well. It is a study of how organisms interact with one another and with their physical environment of matter and energy. That is in a nutshell. If you look at this, ecology is nothing but living organisms or biotic community that is interacting with the non-living environment, or which is the surrounding system, that is the input, that is nutrients and other things that is going into the system, and then the living community which is inclusive of the food web, that is producers, herbivores, carnivores, decomposers, all these are the biotic community. So, the living organisms of a habitat and their non-living environment function together as one unit called ecological system or ecosystem. So, this is the definition of so this system has every system has a kind of boundary which is a little loose definition. So, this is not a boundary which is, so it can be also defined, because it is a system, it may have a boundary which may be defined in various ways thermodynamically. So, the next question is, what keeps us and other organisms alive? So, life is sustained by the flow of energy from the sun through the biosphere, the cycling of nutrients within the biosphere and gravity. So, the earth with its natural resources that is generated by the flow of energy from sun sustains life on earth. Next question is, what are the major components of an ecosystem? So, as we have defined, ecosystems have living, that is biotic, and non-living abiotic components, and some organisms produce the nutrients they need, others get their nutrients by consuming other organisms, and some other recycle nutrients back to producers. So, you could see that the system that we have seen has all the components, that is some of them are using the nutrients, and it is flowing from one level like producers to herbivores to carnivores, or it could also be directly producers may get decomposed, herbivores will get decomposed or carnivores will get decomposed. All this decomposition again brings back the nutrients in a cyclic manner into the system. So, the important concept that we have said is nutrient cycling in the is one of the important component that maintains life on earth. So, if we break these components by doing various things. So, now if you look at this this cycle that is shown here in this system, you can see the human interventions at various levels. Humans can disturb many aspects of this cycle by interfering at each stage. So, we could you can think and list what are the interferences that humans do at various stages in this ecosystem that we have shown as a food web, or as a energy flow diagram, or as a nutrient flow diagram. All these ways you can represent a food web in this or we can show an ecosystem. So, basically how for example, as though we are a part of this ecosystem, how for example, we may be interfering in each of this stage in disrupting the energy flow and the material flow in this systems. So, that is one of the negative contributions of human beings to the system. So, all other living systems, if you look at whether we want to look at producers, herbivores, carnivores, or any other animal, what do they use? They use only the input, that is the material that is flowing into them. So, the only energy harvesting system that is available here is the producers or the plants, and then from there energy is flowing into the next level through the food that is consumed by herbivore, that is they eat plants and then they get the energy for their sustenance, and then from there the energy is flowing into carnivores. So, if you look at that, the only direct energy harvesting, solar energy harvesting agent here is the plants which are producing it. So, the next question that arises here is what happens to the energy that is in an ecosystem. So, the energy that is flowing through the ecosystems in as we know, energy is flowing through the ecosystems in food chains and webs. So, as energy flows through ecosystems in food chains and webs, the amount of chemical energy available to organisms at each succeeding trophic level decreases. So, you can see that in the previous diagram. So, when from producers to herbivores, there is some efficiency with which energy is flowing. Similarly, from each of this stage, if you take, there is an efficiency that we can look up, and that is very important. So, that is why it is known as ecological efficiency at each trophic level. So, how does energy and material flow through these ecosystems is an important thing that we need to understand when we are looking at ecology. When we understand this, as I said, there is a definition of ecological efficiency here. So, the ecological efficiency can be defined in various ways. So, one is the net primary production, or NPP, that is the net primary productivity of plants. So, the gross primary production is the first stage, which is like taking energy from sun. Plants convert that energy into useful glucose or matter, and that glucose is transferred from the plants, that is the so the gross primary production is nothing but the total energy that is produced by the plants, and from there they use some energy for their respiration and other purposes. So, that gross primary productivity minus respiration will give us the net primary production, and from the net primary production, that is what is the plant mass that we see growing on earth. Okay. So, the herbivores, let us say, take up the plants. So, that is the next level of energy flow. So, this is the second level, this is for the plants, how the energy is flowing, and then the next level is how the energy is flowing in the next level, that is the herbivores. So, it is defined as the exploitation efficiency, how efficiently a herbivore is exploiting the available food sources that is present there. So, basically they will ingest the food, and some amount will be defecated and lost from the system, and remaining things will be assimilated, which will be used for their growth. So, this growth is considered as the gross secondary production here. So, the efficiency is calculated as assimilation efficiency at this stage. So, what is remaining as after defecation is the assimilation efficiency. So, then from the herbivores, so basically they also have respiration and excretion which happens, and depending upon the amount of energy that they are using. So the remaining amount, that is the net secondary production. So basically net primary productivity or primary production happens at the plants level, net secondary production will happen at the herbivore level. So you can calculate what is known as the net production efficiency from this. So you can see the ecological efficiency is defined as the sum of this or the processes that goes on from gross primary production till assimilation of the nutrients in a herbivore. So that is the ecological efficiency of the system. So the question is, what happens to matter in an ecosystem? Matter in the form of nutrients cycles within and among ecosystems and the biosphere. So this is very important that the nutrients have to, then if we break the cycle in various ways that we interfere, then the question of the nutrient availability and the flow in the ecosystem and among the ecosystems will get affected. Human activities are altering this. So these are known as the biogeochemical cycles. Thus the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, the carbon cycle, all these are examples of the nutrient and the biogeochemical cycles, which is very important for the sustenance of life. For example, if a cycle is broken and let us say a particular nutrient is not available to the ecosystems, so the ecosystem will get deprived of that nutrient, and they will start dying out or in declining in its existence. How do we study ecosystems? That is one of the questions that come up. There are various ways in which ecologists or train people who are studying ecosystems. So they do a field research. Examples are like you hear about the census of wild animals. So or to find out how the population of a particular animal is changing, or a particular species is increasing or decreasing, or how the population dynamics of it is over a period of time. Or it could be the behavior of a particular animal. One needs to know, for example, what are the food habits of a particular species, let us say a bird, or let us say a particular insect. What does it eat, how does it behave in a particular environment. All these are studies which ecologists may do. So it could be at a system level, it could be at ecosystem level, it could be at individual species level, it could be at community level, it could be at behavioral level. So there are various ways in which one can study by going to the field and directly observing the individuals or the communities. So then you can also do laboratory research to understand ecosystems. So sometimes there are various experiments that are conducted in inside laboratories. For example, population studies you can do using small organisms like single cell organisms or paramecium or some algal growth or other or bacteria, yeast. All these organisms can be used for studying, let us say, population or behavior, how they respond to environment. All these parameters can be varied and then looked upon in a laboratory itself to get insights about how species behave, but it could be different from what exactly could be happening in the field for different organisms. Similarly, we also, it is not that ecology is a subject which is only descriptive in nature, it uses a whole lot of quantitative data which is involving mathematics and statistics. For example, if one wants to understand the ecology of a place, we need to study the population dynamics, which is involving lot of mathematical models and statistical estimations. And sometimes physical models and other chemical models are required also to study ecosystems and the flow of energy and matter in the ecosystems, as well as the behavioral study, other aspects of ecosystems. So the systems concept in ecology is very important. So why do we emphasize this? A group of interacting, interrelated or interdependent parts made up of matter and energy that forms a complex whole. So anything that uses matter and energy to organize, maintain or change itself. So these are considered as brought in to elaborate on the systems concept in ecology. So that anything that uses matter and energy to organize or maintain or change itself. It could be a glass of water, it could be a frog, a city. These are all systems which will be either organizing or maintaining or changing itself at every given point using matter and energy. So based on the systems concept, ecosystems also can be considered as either isolated systems, which means there is no exchange of energy or matter with the environment. It could be a closed system. For example, if I enclose some organism inside a completely closed container, which does not have any exchange of matter or energy with its surroundings. It could be considered as an isolated system, and how it behaves could be studied. Closed system exchanges energy but not matter and attain true thermodynamic equilibrium with the environment. So, these are all based on the assumptions of ecosystems are also thermodynamic systems, which are either isolated, closed or open systems. So, open systems exchange both energy and matter. Thermodynamically they are not in true equilibrium, but are in dynamic steady state. So, this is mostly the case of most of the ecosystems. They are in dynamic steady state and they are not in a true thermodynamic equilibrium. So, there are examples of natural ecosystems which could be any wetland or a marsh or a swamp, a pond, lake, grasslands, forest, ocean. All this could be examples of natural ecosystems, which could be either terrestrial or it could be aquatic. And the non-living part of it includes air, water and soil, and the basic elements and compounds of the environment, which could be the climate regime and physical factors like temperature, relative humidity. All this affects the ecosystems. Similarly, inorganic substances that also flows through the ecosystems, so they can also affect the state and the state and the condition of an ecosystem, like water, carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, etc. All these materials flow through the ecosystems. Organic substances, which is also present in these are non-living, but well required for the existence of the ecosystems in the total